Okay, I would like to welcome Callum Skinner. Welcome to the High School of Glasgow podcast for our sporting and PE department. You will be officially the first Olympic gold medalist we've ever had on this, so welcome.
Thank you.
So, as I said to you, we'll try and keep this not too long, mainly because kids' attention span is terrible. Nothing to do with we don't think you have enough interesting things to say. But, right, we'll just kick straight into there. School. James Gillespie High School, is that correct?
Yeah, for high school. Moved around a lot as a kid though, so started primary school in Glasgow, another primary school in Dunfermline, and then another primary school in Edinburgh. Ended up at James Gillespie's after that, so been around the country a little bit.
So James Gillespie's actually was second or third rated high state school in Edinburgh. Was it a very
Yeah.
nice school there?
No, for a while we were. I think for a while we were actually the best in the country for state schools. But it's gone through a little bit of a transformation to try and kind of share that kind of niche that we have, because we had a statistic which hung over us for a little while, which was that our catchment area included no social housing at all. And it was quite important to try and share that out, because obviously as a state school, and same with independent schools with scholarships and stuff like that, you want to have a bit of diversity in there. So that was something that was pushed pretty hard, and the standards have still stayed high. So anyone who's worrying about that is kind of been put to bed.
It's Marchmont area, isn't it? Am I right?
Yeah, leafy Marchmont. Yeah. So it's a nice part of town.
Very nice. But because I taught in a place called Beauclair, which is a very strange catchment area. It's got Drumchapel, and it's also got some of the richest parts of Glasgow. But you find that there's a dragging up rather than anything else, and it's people tend to get there and go to the higher standards. So, right. In your school, what was your favourite subjects? What inspired you the most? Hit me.
Favorite subjects were like social sciences, basically. So I'm a dyslexic, so I was pretty useless at English, although I managed to get higher in that, and science and maths, but got my higher in it. Just kind of pushed through and got the calculator in the mental maths section, which was helpful. But no, like my kind of passion there was social sciences, and not necessarily PE. We'll probably touch on this a little bit later, but I always found far more comfortable in club sport than I did in PE. But yeah, no, I kind of just got my teeth into history, especially. Didn't take it for a standard grade, crashed it at higher, got an A in that pretty much straight away. So find a bit of a natural ability there. And that's kind of what I love. That's what I love from an academic point of view.
Nice. And so you talked about there your more passion for club sports. Did you play a variety of sports when you were younger, or was it?
Yeah, try absolutely everything. Like my mum was pretty passionate about getting us to just do something. And I wasn't really that into football. I kind of played rugby a little while for Buttermuir Club. But yeah, tried out like everything on the go. Like, so whether it was like kayaking, badminton, fencing, like any kind of club sport going, I'd be up for it. And the reason that I guess kind of PE didn't appeal to me as much, like it might have changed now, and it's probably school by school, as you know, Gillespie's is far more of a kind of social science orientated kind of school, was that club sport for me enabled me to get to a much deeper level. It wasn't necessarily just kind of a group of 30 kids, some who are invested in sports, some who forget their kit every week on purpose, trying their best to give it a go. Club sport, you were always surrounded by like-minded individuals, and that's what kind of appealed to me, I guess.
Brilliant. So that is the challenge with any PE, let's be honest, that you have kids who are really keen to do it, and there's other kids who are not. I'll be honest with you, Cam, we don't really have that challenge in our school. Every kid is desperately keen on the sport and loves their PE. But so I probably didn't introduce. I assume most people will know who you are, but you are Olympic gold medalist in cycling. So you team cycling and also individual sprint track cycling is where you is your sport. Now, I was doing a lot of research on you. And so for a bit of background, we actually, the reason we know each other is we trained together in the Pleasance gym when we were in Scottish Institute of Sport. You were, I think maybe you're 2 or 3 younger than I am, and you were just this skinny kid that was in the gym training all the time. And I remember there was maybe 4 or 5 or some guys going, who's this guy? Like, what's he doing here? Pushing all these weights. And then the next thing we hear that this guy that we called Boots was in the
Boots,
gym.
yeah.
Boots was in the gym and he had beaten Chris Hoy's 200-meter record. And we were looking around at this guy going, how is this guy can beat Chris Hoy in anything? Talk us through that. How did we go from being a social science guy to all of a sudden we're now beating Chris Hoy's record?
I think when I was at school, this kind of comes into when British cycling took me on board, because I was actually the slowest rider to ever turn professional in the British team. And I think what they identified was that I was a really driven kid, but I was incredibly scattered. So we didn't have head boy or anything at our school. You had like a student council. I was head of that. Really into my social life as well. So got in trouble a few times with that. Like just doing absolutely everything that was on the go, and loved it. But I think what they saw was like a really talented, driven kid who just didn't have any direction. So when British Cycling did take me on, they pretty, I guess, brutally to start with, kind of funneled that passion and that energy into one area. They cut it from maybe like 20 areas where you're kind of doing it, to the best of your ability, but you can't do everything well, to channeling it into one thing. So I remember when I first moved down to Manchester, got that call, I still had a university offer on the table from Dundee. And at that time, I was still considering whether to do both. But they made it pretty clear that if you come down here, you're committing to one thing. And that's to be the best possible physical asset you can be. And in some respects, that has its downsides. You become quite a bit of a one-trick pony. And I think later in my career, I definitely struggled with that aspect of just being an athlete. But to start with, I think that was a really good strategy they implemented. They were like, obviously I was still quite skinny, but had a lot of promise.
Yeah.
And they managed to harness that really well. And as soon as I did have that single goal, the results started coming. And despite being the slowest guy to have been taken on the squad, I was the fastest progressor they'd ever seen once I moved down there.
That's fascinating. Do you think that the fact that you had your fingers in so many pies and you wanted to do so many things was actually has helped you in the long run? It's something we talk about in sport all the time, is early specialization versus, doing as much as possible. I mean, do you think it did help you, and do you, obviously,
I wouldn't
where
change
you have
it.
to specialize?
Yeah, no, I absolutely wouldn't change it. And it's the same thing that I kind of say to, like, sometimes I'm sure you get the same thing. You can be faced with parents that are a little bit pushy for success for their child. And I think especially under the age of 16, it shouldn't be about success. It should be about enjoyment and trying pretty much everything that's out there. Because it's probably quite easy to dismiss that like kayaking and fencing and all these other random sports didn't play any part in my Olympic success, but they probably did. They made me a better balanced athlete who was able to be more adaptable, more flexible in going forward. And also that early enjoyment in sport is critical. And I can't overplay this enough, because if you are lucky enough to turn professional, you're going to be faced with a lot of tough times. And I can genuinely say that it was that initial love and excitement for the sport that carried me through it. And if I was just in there, and my only purpose was to be successful, I would have really struggled. So I wouldn't have changed that. My parents were always supportive, but not pushy. And, keeping that varied background in there, and British Cycling probably stepped in at the right time to specialise.
How old were you then? What age were you?
So 17, moved down to Manchester, went full time. So jumping into the deep end.
You've got a lot of experience in there. You've got a really vast and varied experience before you're 17. 17, do you know what? He's ready now. And then, as you say, you were the slowest guy, but then all of a sudden, you quickly became the quickest guy. So
yeah, for sure. And it's something to say kind of for the long run as well. For a lot of the guys who might be listening to this, it's like, like being the slowest guy to ever be taken on the team is a bit of a gamble, but someone did take that gamble because I showed promise. I wasn't the quickest developer. I was quite skinny. But someone saw that within me, and it wasn't just about your kind of physical attributes. It was about your attitudes and your performance, your attitude, sorry. And they obviously saw something within that, and that helped me get on the team despite not being the finished product yet.
Yeah, that's in every walk of life as well. It's a really good trait to have, that kind of desire and desperation and that real attitude to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I say now, like, because I'm in a different period of my life now where I've retired, and you know, I mainly do work in marketing now, and I say the same kind of thing to my employers who are maybe looking to take me on. It's like I might not have all the answers now, but I'm so determined to get there and deliver a high standard product or a good standard of work, and that shouldn't be underestimated. And I think a lot of people buy into that.
No, brilliant. So now we will talk about that rather incredible career. So I'm kind of taking out your youth records because there is so many of them that would take us about 8. The under 23s European stuff, all of that stuff, we'd be here all day. But it was in 2008 that you broke Chris Hoy's record, and then things really kind of snowballed from there. Except for, now this is kind of a wee sidetrack, and this goes back to your determination stuff. In 2011, you didn't make the 2012 Olympics, but do you want to talk about why that was? I mean, I don't know, it's up to you. You're comfortable talking about that, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, in 2011, I was pretty much the fastest guy in the team by the flying 200 meter, which is the record we were referring to earlier. And judging that, I was kind of taken on the team in 2009, to already be kind of pulling out those times was pretty good. So it was a bit of a meteoric rise, but something that stopped me in my tracks was I was misdiagnosed, I guess, with lymphoma, which is a kind of cancer. So I went up to Edinburgh for the weekend to see my girlfriend. I got stung by a bee and somehow connected it to that. But basically, I came back down south on the Monday and had this massive lump on the right side of my neck. And went into the gym, and all the medical staff pretty immediately went, "Oh, that's not good, and we'll send you to the hospital. We'll get you looked after," and all that kind of stuff. So went to A&E. Was looked after pretty well by one of the mutual connections that was there. They did bloods, did ultrasound, all the kind of different examinations, and it ended up in a conversation where they said, you know, you've got cancer, and it seems pretty aggressive, pretty advanced because it's come so quickly. We don't think it's glandular fever because it's on one side. This is really atypical. So then I was referred to a cancer specialist who did a series of biopsies and kind of CT scans where you're getting radioactive dye pumped into you while you get scanned, which is an interesting one. And then ultimately it came back as benign, and the lump was reducing. So they kind of basically just said to me, it's not cancer, but we would have put money on it. And I was like, oh, okay, nice. But this hasn't been the most pleasant month that I've been through in my life. But yeah, that was one of the things that really kind of derailed me. Because once you get that diagnosis, it's really scary. And even though there's a 99% survival chance for that specific form of cancer, I was still kind of walking around as if people were looking at me as if I was the Walking Dead a little bit. So it meant a break from training. It meant I kind of lost that momentum. But ultimately, I'm just thankful that it was benign, obviously, and still found success after that. But it was a pretty big deal being down there, kind of 18 years old, and having to deal with that kind of more or less by myself.
Was that the London Olympics? Am I right?
Yeah. So I actually still attended, but not as a competitor. Obviously, I ended up sitting next to the Scottish secretary and had to kind of tell him what was going on.
Oh, wow.
But it was good for igniting that passion, because I'd say up until that point, I wasn't kind of truly invested in that Olympic goal. Like it would be a nice thing to have, but then to be sitting in that velodrome, hearing the crowds, kind of understanding the majesty of the moment, as weird as that sounds, was just something really special. And then I think from that point on, I was like, I'm making Rio.
And when that drive and determination obviously kicked back in, and 2014, first world title comes.
First World Cup title, yeah.
World Cup title.
Yeah, World Championship is still something I'm missing from my CV, as we call it.
And also in 2014, something else happened that year that was pretty impressive. It was a clean sweep of the Nationals.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the kind of niche ones for sport fans out there. But basically, there's four sprint events at the British Champs. There's only three in the Olympic Games. There's four at the World Championships. But basically, doing a clean sweep of four is a pretty impressive thing to do. And the British Champs are actually like that we joke within the team that they're probably one of the hardest events that we do. Like, we'd actually prefer to have less information on our opponents than we do at the British Champs, because we know exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's easier to be up against like a Lithuanian or a German and kind of stereotype how they might race.
Or just racing.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to British Champs, you're second guessing absolutely everything because you know these guys so well. But yeah, so I took a clean sweep, and first and so far only guy to have ever done that. And if you put that in context with Chris Hoy, Jason Kenny, Jamie Staff, like all the guys who come before, that's genuinely one of my kind of secret proudest achievements.
Yeah. Then 2016, obviously a pretty memorable year for you, I would say. Now, there was also another World Cup in Hong Kong that year.
Yeah.
Another successful World Cup.
Yeah. But like we were totally up against it before the Olympic Games. Like, and it was a pretty bad time for the team as a whole. Like the women's team hadn't qualified for the Olympic Games by that point. Quite famously in London, they had a pretty public dispute in front of the BBC with one of the coaches. And we were at that same World Cup, we finished in 6th place in the team event with 4 months to the Olympic Games, and we were thinking, like, is this the end of GB's golden run? Because I don't think everyone appreciates our success rate within that event. So like every single athlete that's been fielded by Team GB in a track cycling event, bar one, since 2008, has come away with a medal of some color.
Wow.
And you're talking about 12 medal opportunities in every Olympic Games, 2 guys in each event. So that's a huge success rate. And the media were always quite tantalized by the idea of when it was going to come to an end, because that makes a good story.
Yeah. Why were you so successful? What were you doing just better than everybody else?
Well, I think one of the best things is, like, even though we finished at 6th place at the World Cup before the World Champs, before the Olympics, we kept hold of our culture, which was, like, genuinely, it doesn't matter how you finish at Europeans, World Champs, World Cups, like anything, it doesn't matter as long as you're closer to that Olympic ambition being fulfilled and you're on that trajectory, you're in the right place. And that's something that's unique to us and different with all the other teams. So all the other teams tend to target World Champs as if it's an Olympic Games. Mm-hmm. And what that allows us to do is really build up that peak and build up that curve, and hold something back before the main reason for us all being there, which is Olympic success. But it takes a lot of courage to actually stand by that mantra when you're 25-1 on William Hill and 6th place before the World Champs. It takes a lot. Yeah, but I'd say that was one of the keys to our success. Like, we stuck to the plan. We would not deviate within reason from that plan, and the other nations thought they got us. But I remember the night before we took to the track for the Olympic Games, Chris Hoy came into the village, and at this point we're pitching for like a bronze medal, maybe, if we're lucky. And we went to the food hall, and he sat us down and he went, "You're going to do it again. Like, you're going to take the whole world by storm. Everyone's going to be scratching their heads as to how you've done it, but you're going to do it again." And, like, to be brutally honest, I was sitting there and I was thinking, like, mate, you've been out of the sport for a little while. You don't know how it works anymore. But he was right. And even that kind of little boost in terms of belief, as much as, my cynic self kind of dismantled it to an extent, like, it did give us that element of belief. And then when we set the Olympic record in the first ride, qualified in first place, that's genuinely, for me, that's when the belief started to come. But like, I know everyone turns on the TV, and whenever they see Brits in a cycle race, they expect us to win. But for us, especially pre the Olympic Games, like, nothing could be further from the truth. We were struggling.
Did you catch yourself off guard with that first run? As a team?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think especially for me, again, going back to the dyslexia angle, I tend to bring something different to the team than the other guys do, because a lot of guys, like, cycling's the most measurable sport in the world. Like, if you think, even with running, like, it's hard to measure certain elements, but when you're actually on essentially a measuring machine, you can capture whatever you want. And we have, like, we've got about 50 different metrics that measure 1,000 times a second, from like power, torque, aerodynamic drag, speed, which means there's nowhere to hide if you come into training with a hangover. But
not that you would ever do that as an Olympic.
No, of course not. Of course not. But there's nowhere to hide, and a lot of guys can really get themselves embroiled in that mess of data. Like, data's actually only useful if you know what to do with it, and you use it functionally. But because I was dyslexic, I couldn't actually really do much with that data in the first instance. So it turned out that we'd actually been doing some really promising times at our training camp before the Olympic Games. But I was still kind of pretty oblivious to that. Like, it's weird if someone asked me, like, what's my PBs, I'd genuinely struggle to tell people what my PBs are. Like, I brought something totally different to it, which was much more about, like, how the team's gelling, the more subjective of, like, how we're leading, what we can do to improve in that aspect. And that was a great antidote to the other two in the team who were definitely data and numbers focused. It's probably another element that helped us.
Amazing. And obviously you got your individual silver as well.
Yeah.
I actually just watched that race again this morning. Do you remember that race with Jason?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say, like, once we won that gold, like, that was because we were struggling with just getting the team over the line. The only objective for us was getting the team sprint to win, or to medal, or to succeed. So it meant there was no focus on the other two events that I did individually, because we didn't have the capacity to do it. We realized that, fundamentally, I was the weak link in the team. I was trying to take over from Chris Hoy from 2012. And if I had anything else but that focus in terms of events, we were really going to dilute our chances of winning. So then when it came to a GBGB final on day 3, it was a complete added bonus. And I guess the sprint event is my first real kind of love. It's my favorite event. It's the blue ribbon event of the sport. And I was just, like, overwhelmed to actually be there in the first place. But people always ask me, like, did I think I was going to win against Jason Kenny, Britain's most successful Olympian? And the answer actually is like, yes. Because what was unique about the Olympics is that we actually hold what can be a half-day event over 3 days. So you have your qualifying, your first round, second round in day 1. You have your quarters and your semis in day 2, and then you have the final on the third day. And me and Jason were roommates back in the village, so we had to go to sleep knowing that we had an Olympic final between the two of us the next day.
That's a very situation.
Yeah, but I genuinely feel like by day 2 the momentum was on my side. Like, I'd had a cleaner run to the final stage than Jason had. So we go to best of 3 once we get to quarters onwards, and I just kind of sailed through basically. Whereas Jason had a real tussle with a Russian called Denis Dmitriev, and I was thinking, like, he's done the same amount of riding as I have in the team event. He must be getting a bit tired because he's taken this to best of 3. I've got a chance here. I actually do have a chance. But I'd say, like, it was actually fine sharing a room with him. We are really good mates, and we actually made a decision to go and get at McDonald's the night before, and had a truce, because we were like, if we both have it, we got the same amount of disadvantage.
Oh, nice.
But now there's still little bits of kidology as well. I remember, like, going to sleep before that Olympic final, and he's in this tiny little room with me, little twin bedroom, and I turned off the lights and went, "Oh, good night, Jason," and then waited about 30 seconds and, like, got my desk there absolutely sorted and fixated towards head was, and then, like, flicked the lights back on and went, "Sleep well." Flicked them back off again. But no, like, for me, when that helmet comes on, it's probably the same for the other athletes. When they take to the pitch, that's when you get serious, and the rest of the time, like, there's no point having the added stress of trying to play mind games with your opponent, like, because like, we'd been through a lot together. We just had an amazing success. We're still really good mates, and I wasn't going to jeopardize that because of this kind of final. It's once I get on the track, he's my fiercest competitor. When we get off the track, he's my best mate.
Yeah, it looked like you had a plan. Now, this is me talking from a complete layman. Were you trying to just take the legs out of him and just go a little bit earlier?
Yeah, so we always try and so the sprint is a real it's a game of power and control.
Mm.
And we always talk about being in control of the race. So if you've got a guy who's a bit of a shorter sprinter, you want to take him long and you want to tire them out and you want to move them down the track. People often ask, like, why, like, because you can come to a standstill in this event. You can actually stop your bike.
Yeah.
And the whole point of that is to try and, you might do it if you know your opponent can't do it, because even if they take the front and you don't want it, it just gets them off their balance. It gets them off their game.
Fascinating race to watch.
It's total, like, it's almost kind of toxic masculinity levels of, like,
Yeah.
buff your chest out. If you're sitting at the start line before the race and you're sitting next to someone who is a bit nervous, you might touch your leg to theirs. We do a little bit of a death stare at the beginning. I don't know if anyone's seen that. So, like, when we're lining up on the track, like, if I'm the lead out rider, like, I will look at my opponent and I will not look forward until I have to for the entire race. So it's another show of strength that I can ride the track without looking forwards. Like, if you try and pull a fast one over me, I'm going to notice. Like, you haven't got anything to play with here.
Brilliant.
So there's a mass. It's almost a bit like, again, a game of chess, but it's physical. It's and that's kind of the added element to it. I love the team sprint's very much a time trial. You can't really do anything to throw off your opponents on the other side of the track. But sprint's all about, like, power and control and dominance, and that was an added element to it. I loved it.
I know you're retired now, but hearing you talk about it, it's the passion feels very much still there for this sport, especially that event. You can feel the passion. We're almost back there, eyeing up Jason Kenny for that. Again. No, it is a very interesting sport. Especially that event. Because I can't really think of another event like it where it is, as you say, it's chess, but still you got to be the fastest guy. You can't just be the smartest guy. It's a really
absolutely. I mean, there was Chris Hoy quite famously got beaten by an endurance rider he had about a second and a half in terms of speed on this guy, which in our sport is an absolute country mile. Like, if you advance a tenth a year, you're doing pretty well. And he got beaten because Chris just fell asleep in the last kind of 50 meters of the race, and he was devastated by that. He got the next plane home, and but it's not all about speed. Like, that kind of tactical element is massive. It's massive.
So the other event is 1K time trial.
Yes.
Just for a bit of context, what would be your fastest 1K time trial time?
So we can do a 1 kilometer from a standing start in 1 minute flat.
I mean, it's difficult to comprehend with people who probably don't cycle that much, but if you do cycle, you will be sitting there thinking that is obscene.
Yeah, I mean, just like the physical numbers of it is still something, like, we're talking about the passion about the tactical element, but, like, we're it's the fundamental bit of my love is the speed. And that's what got me into the sport. When you don't have a car license, you don't have a motorbike license, and you can't exercise that speed element of you, go down the velodrome and give it a go. You can pull 2-3G when you're going down the corner. You can be sitting this far away from a motorbike in front of you doing 90 k's an hour. Like, the speed element's absolutely huge, and the numbers that we can end up putting out, like, we're talking like 2,400 watts for peak power. And if you ever jump on a watt bike, just see how close you can get to that.
Nowhere near is the answer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's even probably the highest class rugby professional athletes will be nowhere near that power output.
And then, like, even like torque and stuff, we're putting out more than, like, some guys, we're putting out more than a Ferrari. Like, it's absolutely massive. And that brings you on to a different element about the equipment. The equipment has to deal with those kind of pressures. And I just kind of loved it every time I could break it, because it seemed like a bit of a success.
It's a fascinating sport, and the equipment is another one of those things. Last event, this was for my research stuff. It was Commie Games 2018. I know you didn't retire until a little bit later, but third place Commie Games. So have you only just recently retired in this year?
No, so I kind of pretty well documented, so I don't really mind talking about it. But I started to suffer with some pretty bad mental health issues after 2016, and I was basically just kind of treading water to keep my head up there. And round about 2014 was when I started to sink or drown, I guess. And so weirdly, halfway through that competition where I had to pull out due to it, I realised that this could possibly be my last race, and the kilo is a great way to go out. It's a single ride, and I kind of thought, like, despite what's going on in my head, I can probably get myself to the start line and do a single event. I can do a single ride. And I wanted to do it as well. Like, we went back earlier saying, like, one of the bits that was missing on my CV was world champion, but another bit that was missing was Commonwealth Games medalist, and that goes back to our mantra about the Olympics is all that matters. We were never really in the best place to medal at the Commonwealth Games, so I got myself in a pretty decent position, and I remember looking up at the clock. And it told me that I was in first place with 2 leggers to go, so guaranteed medal. And I guess from that point onwards, it became pretty clear to me that I was going to retire, because I was looking at that, and it should have been a massive kind of lifetime achievement, massive box ticked, and it's good we wear a visor, because I was just in tears behind it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I just can't. And from that point on, I didn't race again. But being in a better place now and looking back, I'm pretty proud of myself for how I did it. Went out with a medal. Went out, arguably at the kind of top of my game, and I'm pretty happy with that.
And that, I mean, thank you for sharing that. It's very, that's a really personal thing, and thanks for sharing that with us. But then that's kind of spurred you on to the next part of your life, which, to be honest, is a pretty fascinating thing for a 26-year-old to be taking on all of these things. Now, am I right? Is it global athlete now? You are.
Yeah. So I think the best way to encapsulate it is that I've gone back to that teenage scattered approach. So when you're an athlete who's retired without specifically a kind of discipline specific degree, or without a degree at all, you kind of have to take the opportunities where they come. And I've tried to craft them as best as I possibly could. I had a massive fallout with the team regarding my mental health issues, so a lot of the relationships I built up there had kind of fallen down. So I had to start from scratch. But that's led to me being like working as head of safety for SIS, a sports nutrition company. Head of sports marketing for Sports Direct Group, doing stuff from a volunteer perspective with Global Athlete, which is a campaign body which tries to encourage better pay and better conditions for athletes. Sitting on the UK Anti-Doping Athletes Commission, the British Olympic Association Athletes Commission. So I've truly embraced that proper scatter approach. 2 startups that I was talking about earlier, that coffee company and the glasses company, and I'm absolutely loving it. Because it's such a nice antidote to having that sole focus. Because as much as that sole focus was productive for me, it was obviously incredibly successful. It was almost kind of ignoring an element of my personality, which is I like to get stuck in, and I like to try different things, and I like to have that variety. So if I could go back and do it again, I probably wouldn't do the all or nothing approach. I'd probably try and keep little bits of it in, to try and keep that balance. And it might have led me to being a more sustainable athlete, might have led to me not retiring so soon. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to now, just seizing absolutely every opportunity that comes through the door. And thankfully I've kind of started to get to the stage now where there's enough opportunities that I'm in this quite privileged position where I'm starting to be able to pick and choose what I take on.
On your becoming a more sustainable athlete thing, this is it's something we talk about in rugby, definitely, but in all sports, it's there is definitely 2 types of people when it comes to that. There are the people that must focus solely on the sport, or they just won't be successful, and there are the other people that obviously, like yourself, that need other things going on in their life. And I think that's really interesting. I suppose you can only look back now and know that. That's one of these things you can only know in hindsight, that actually I've probably only had this 5-6 year career, this 7-year career, because I wasn't able to just solely focus on one thing. And if I was, and you could go back and tell 21-year-old Callum now, listen, Callum, you need to keep up on now a couple of other things, or you're going to burn yourself out by the time.
I mean,
probably 26, 27. You're probably coming into your power peak.
I had elements of it. So I remember when I was actually looking to retire around about 2013, because things just weren't coming together. I was having a bit of a a block in my career. And one of the things I thought would be really important was to find some kind of value outside of sport, because it's quite precarious. Like we have contracts which go, quarter by quarter, regardless of how long you've been on the team. So, and even within that quarter, they can sack you immediately if they want to. So there's no job.
Of an Olympic cycle or quarter?
No, quarter of a year.
That's probably the worst contract I've ever heard in my life, I'll be honest.
Yeah. It's same for Chris Hoy, same for all those guys. Like we're properly on a knife edge the entire time, which is something I'd argue that they need to change, because not everyone deals with being on that the whole time. But I remember thinking, like, if I retire tomorrow, what am I going to do? And that was causing me a great deal of angst, because I can pedal a bike quickly, but what else can I offer to society? So I ended up on the BA Future Pilots program, and got to a pretty advanced stage, and then kind of made a personal call to leave that and go back to cycling, because it ticked that box for me. I realized I did have something after cycling. I did have something to do. And what I'd say about athletes who are looking to decide as to whether they're someone who needs that stimulation or doesn't, I would just encourage them to not get labeled with that. It's something that can morph over time. So, like, absolutely, for me, for the first couple of years of my career, the best thing was to plow myself into cycling. But later on in that journey, it should have changed. And it's about keeping an open mind to that. It's not being scared to bring in that bit of variety, because, I guess that could have led to a bit of a longer career.
Yeah, that's amazing, because the only thing I can really apply it to is rugby. That's obviously what I know best, and I look now, the rugby players are definitely becoming more and more open to not just doing rugby. You're in the coffee world now. There's obviously George Cruz, Brad Barrett. All these guys are getting into different things, and they all talk about how it's so good for their mental health that they've just got.
Yeah, and rugby's leading the way on that. Like, it's I read a really good article about Saracens and how they actually, like, really encourage their athletes to take up separate business interests. And if they're being well behaved, they won't plow that back illegally into the team. That was a joke. I'll take that. That was a joke.
You're right, though. We're trying. They are trying their best, and they are completely aware that they can't have their Olympic goal. They can't have their Stuart Hogg burning out at 27, 28. But so the way I kind of read the global athlete stuff was, it was all about the rights of the athletes, and I had no idea, excuse my ignorance, that an Olympic gold medalist or an Olympic athlete would be on a quarterly year contract. That can't be any way to live your life. That must be petrifying for anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something we're trying to improve, because unfortunately you see a lot of athletes who fall by the wayside. They might have made that same commitment I did of not going for a university degree, and it not being paid off with an Olympic gold medal at the end of it. And you can see a lot of athletes really struggle when they retire, and that's essentially because there's no security blanket at all. And I don't feel like we're asking for the world, but to put yourself in athletes, in Olympic sports athletes' shoes, you might have been on a salary of £7,500 for 3 years, and which is good. It's good to be professional, but it doesn't give you any kind of savings to fall back on when things go tits up.
Yeah.
And what's more, I don't like using the term institutionalized, but I'll use it in this instance. But you're not part of it. It's so many aspects. You're not part of the NHS because all of your healthcare is taken care of, all your bikes are taken care of, all your nutrition is taken care of. And when you add in, and you're as well as your teammates, if you lose all that in one day, that's a lot to go, because your identity is probably linked to the fact that you're a cyclist, but you're a cyclist without a bike. You're a cyclist without the tools you need to continue to perform. And in the meantime, you've got to try and navigate your way around the NHS for the first time, which doesn't sound like the biggest issue, but if you've never experienced it, it can be. And try and actually stand on your own 2 feet. Like it's kind of a double-edged sword. The program's designed to make it so you don't have to think about anything else. You're just there to perform, and your only job is to make sure you're in the best physical shape possible. But the flip side to that is that that's not real life. And my S&C coach summed it up quite well. He's like, you're doing the only job in the world where you have a team of people helping you to achieve your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And that will not happen in any other walk of life. Yeah. Like, there's so much more to navigate. And I think we need to try and better prepare the athletes for that eventuality, and having a bit of balance is key to that.
You're probably quite unique because it sounds like you're happier now you've left cycling. It sounds like you're in a much better mental place, whereas I've obviously got a lot of friends who've left rugby. I've been through this as well, where I've retired, and you go from having 45 best mates there every day, and as you say, everybody doing everything for you, to overnight, you don't have access to these things anymore. But
Yeah.
I heard a really good quote the other day that was, make sure you're retiring to something and not retiring from something. So it definitely sounds like you've retired to something, even if it is 15 things that you've retired to. It sounds like you've retired to something that's actually made you very...
I mean, to be blatantly honest, when I did first retire, I didn't have anything because it was on medical grounds, essentially. And I've spoken to a lot of rugby boys, but we take the care of our athletes to the nth degree. If you can't cook, you get food sent to your house. If you are not very good at washing out your shaker at the end of the session, someone will come and wash it out for you. If you can't wash your clothes, someone will come and wash it for you. Like it's absolutely everything.
Yeah.
But no, I probably am happier. I think, especially in comparison to 2017, 2018, well, definitely a lot happier. But it doesn't take away from the times that I did have on the team, which were some of the happiest days of my life. Even with that bit of that kind of precarious nature of the contract and being measured in 50 different ways every day to see if you were getting slower or faster. I still miss that kind of camaraderie and that team and that atmosphere that we had there. It's not something I look back on and I'm bitter about at all. It's something I still actively encourage kids to get into. But if they're just willing to listen to a few of my lessons about what it's like and how you can make the most of it.
And do you jump on the bike still? Do you go get down the velodrome here in Glasgow?
Yeah, I do, but I keep crashing. So I think it's one of these things when you retire, you start having delusions of how good you used to be.
Everybody gets better in retirement, don't you worry. Everybody gets better.
So I had a crash a month or two ago. So tore a ligament in my knee. I had a crash about 9 months before that, and face planted a van at 25 miles an hour. Went through the windscreen, almost got to the driver. So that was nothing major, but just a really bad concussion, which you guys will be aware of. So I'm still on the bike, and one of the best things is that it's a choice. I remember quite soon after the tired, I was like, I'm going to the gym in the morning. And I was like, and it was almost as if it was like a command. It's like, you will go to the gym in the morning. Then I woke up and it was dark outside and it was cold, and I just realized that I couldn't be bothered. And I remember getting myself dressed, and then I was like, this is a choice. This is a choice now. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And that was so empowering. It was actually really good. And then that's kind of shaped what I do go forward. It's like, I've done the bit of chasing numbers. I've done the bit of chasing performances. Now I just do it for that love that I had when I was 14 years old. And it's really nice.
No, that's cool. And is that love now directed? So why coffee? Why coffee and glasses? Is coffee a passion, or is that just something you thought, it's you, am I right to say, Philip Hines and Owen Dole?
Yeah. So
Olympics gold medalist.
So the coffee thing's an interesting angle because, guys would go through periods of 11 and a half months a year of like pure abstinence from alcohol and things like that. So there are sacrifices, but you make a lot of compromises in your athletic career. And coffee was actually one of the avenues which felt like a treat and felt like a place in which you could sit down with your mates and essentially have a pint, but you're not actually making yourself slower.
Maybe faster.
Yeah, so that's why it became a massive part of our sport. It's cycling's becoming so big; it's almost like a culture now. There's fashion elements to it, there's coffee elements to it. It's and it just felt like a great way in which to try and share our stories with our fans through the medium of coffee. So every time you order a pack, it comes with a little story which explains the name behind it. And it's been really good actually to try and share a different passion of mine, which is still related to, I guess, a first passion of mine with people that are out there, and it's been going really well so far.
Well, as I say, I ordered mine this morning. I am order number 408, so I believe it's 2016. You have a chance to win the signed top that has like a load of Olympic gold athletes on it. Is it not?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
So
so we're not shying away from the cycling connection at all.
yeah,
So basically, we got a competition on. So for our first 2016 bags that are sold, we're sitting at about 700 at the moment. You're entered randomly into a draw to win a jersey signed by all of the Rio 2016 Team GB team, which includes Bradley Wiggins, Mark Cavendish, all that kind of stuff, and ourselves. So yeah, that'll be pretty exciting. It's one of these things that I wish I could actually just win myself, to be honest.
So, High School of Glasgow kids, if you want to win that, let's get on it. Because I bought mine this morning and I'm praying that I'm going to. So, when you're picking out the numbers, just make sure it's
Yeah.
got 408 on it. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
And the
Will
glasses,
do.
what's the skip with the glasses? Just another thing?
Yeah, so that was a high school mate. So basically, cycling's at a funny place in the UK at the moment. So if anyone, say if I'm speaking to a parent and they've got an 8-year-old, I find it quite hard to suggest that they should go out on the road because it's quite dangerous. I've been hit by cars a couple of times. I know people who've died, unfortunately, because they've been involved in accidents with cars. Statistically, it's still less risky than walking down the street, but obviously you cover more distance on a bike, so it kind of balances out. But yeah, it's not where it needs to be in the UK. Drivers are still quite aggressive, and basically hindsight glasses are a tool which gives cyclists more information as to what's happening behind them. We talk about this thing a lot of the time called close passing or punish passing. And it's where a car will intentionally come close to you when they're passing you, to the point even sometimes where they'll skim you with their wing mirror, just to basically say, get off the road. And basically these glasses give you the information to try and avoid that.
Wow.
Whenever you're cycling on the road, you should always have a good amount of distance from the curb in case that were to happen. But we're just trying to kind of reduce fatalities and make it safer, because the biggest barrier to any cyclist going out on the road is safety. They don't feel safe. And as long as the infrastructure isn't there, as long as there's still inconsiderate drivers on the road, we feel like we've got a product which can help them out.
No, that's all. Well, I mean, I definitely need to say I do a reasonable amount of road cycling, and I've had my fair few accidents. I've ended up underneath a couple of transit vans in my time, so I know what you're talking about. Do you know, Callum, that has been incredible. We have covered school life, this dyslexia stuff that, it clearly hasn't hampered you at all in your life, which there is obviously lots of dyslexic kids in different walks of life in our school and in every school, and it's clearly never hampered you. If anything, it sounds like it maybe helped you when it came to cycling. You
got to find the advantages.
I can't deal with those numbers. And covered your incredible career. We didn't even talk about the kind of under 23 junior stuff, which would have taken a long time, which we kind of bypassed over. We covered the 2011, 2012 stuff, the mental health stuff, which is obviously at the minute probably more prevalent than anything else. And the new future next steps. You've had some life. Are you 28 now? 27, 28?
27, yeah, 28 in August. So still feels scary to be knocking on the door of 30.
You know what though? Now this Olympics has been delayed a year. There's always a chance.
Reigning champion for another year.
Exactly. There's always a chance. Do you know what? So we'll do a really quick quiz. This is going to be
okay.
Rapid fire because we've probably kept you too long. As I say, not for you, it's for the kids. They'll be like, what's going on now? But these are the questions we've asked everybody. Try and do them quick fire. First, just to let you know, Hoggy got absolutely none of them. I think everybody's really struggled with them, to be honest. How many people are kitted out to play in a competitive ice hockey match?
I'll go with 32.
What? Are you kidding me?
Well, not on the field, but they're sitting at the side. Those guys are subbed in and out the whole time. Mate, maths isn't my strong point.
32. I don't even know if there's 32 people in the crowd. No, there's only 20.
Oh, which league are we talking? Is it the same?
Right, okay.
I don't know.
We'll just bypass. I'll edit that one out. What is the sport with the largest playing field?
Aussie rules?
I think most people have said that. It's actually polo.
Okay.
On horseback. Now, this is probably quite a difficult one to explain. Who are the football players with the highest combined transfer fees? So it's not who's got the highest transfer fees, who's got the combined transfer fees. You got to think modern day.
Mario Balotelli?
Absolutely not.
He's moved around a bit, though. He's moved around.
Moved around a bit. Think, come on, Brazilian super famous.
Oh, Brazilian super famous. Neymar?
Yes, top.
Yes.
280 million. Second one, you got to get him. He's just came back and smashed all his fitness records after lockdown.
I'm not a big football fan. This is exposing me here.
Portuguese.
Oh, Ronaldo.
Yeah. And last one, you might not get. He's Argentinian, had a disastrous spell at Man United.
Oh, the guy who bites people.
No, that's Suarez. It's Angel Di Maria.
Nah, it's a tricky one. You've exposed me on my football knowledge, eh?
So this one, you're obviously quite keen on your speed. Now, this one, do you ski or board or anything like that?
Yeah, I used to ski, yeah.
Good. So what is the fastest speed ever recorded on skis?
I got 120 miles an hour.
Oh, I don't know what it is in miles an hour. It's 254.9 kilometers an hour.
Jeez, I'm trying not to swear at that one.
Frightening. So this one is more for you. This is more of a general kind of away from sporty one. We've also asked people this. This one has not been well received either. How many children does Donald Trump have? And do you know their names?
We got Balin.
Yep.
We've got the Don Jr.
Yep.
Eric.
Yep.
The daughter who I've forgotten the name of at the moment, but we'll go for 4.
He's got 2 other daughters. He's got Ivanka and Tiffany.
Ivanka. Oh, I forgot about Tiffany. Who could forget about Tiffany?
Okay, this is a cycling specific one, so I'm kind of hopeful you'll get this one. Now, this blew my mind as well. The fastest speed ever recorded on a push bike, on a bike.
Well, I'm going to test your knowledge on this one. Was it assisted or unassisted?
It's whatever Google search said.
Mate, this is the issue with this kind of stuff. Like, I was at a rugby pub quiz and they said, what's the standard length of an Olympic velodrome? And apparently I got it wrong.
Did you debate it?
Yeah. And they were like, what do you know? And I was like...
Not a lot, actually. You're correct.
Yeah. But no, so... I believe they do one where they sit behind like a Porsche Macan or something like that, and they put a lot of failings on the back of it. And I think that's about 180 miles an hour.
You're actually not far away. It's 167 miles an hour. And it was a woman.
Oh, was it?
It was a woman called Denise Muller-Cornet.
Because I was thinking that like Guy who's called Guy, did one.
Guy. Well, listen, as I say, you probably can challenge these because this was Google. So,
okay.
So this way you'll smash this one. Who were your teammates for your Olympic record in 2016, and what was your time?
Okay, you're not going to get me on time, but teammates for Phil Hines, Jason Kenny.
Yeah, and your time is
44 something.
It's actually 42.440.
I told you, mate, this is why I'm useless at this kind of stuff.
Oh, that's very, very
genuinely good. Don't
know. Where did you win your first World Cup medal?
Guadalajara, Mexico.
Guadalajara, excellent. And coffee-related question, which country produces the most coffee beans?
Brazil.
Brazil, that is correct. Yeah. I was torn between Brazil and Colombia, but that is correct. And that concludes, I don't want to spend too much longer doing this.
Was that better than Hoggy's?
So much, but Hoggy had a round on himself, and he's so vain that he got absolutely every single one right. He knew. So, for example, the question was: he knew the date of his first test, who he replaced, and what time he was replaced. Like, it was
wow!
So, what I'm going to do, Callum, is I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm going to turn it off record, and so don't hang up, and I'll just I'll chat to you for 5 minutes after. But thank you. Do you want to say anything before we go?
Yeah, I just say for any kids who are kind of struggling with dyslexia or depression, you've got to speak out and keep finding help. Dyslexia, try and look at the advantages and what you can bring. It's not about what you can do. It's not about what you can't do. It's about what you can do. Incredible. What a guy. Thank you, Callum. There's so much. It's really honestly appreciated. Thanks very much.